Hello and welcome to the Zotero Workshop. My name is Fritz. I am one of the research instruction librarians here at the University of Niagara Falls, and today I'm going to be hosting our journey through Zotero. Over the past decade, I have used Zotero quite intensively as a researcher and a co-author. I've also used it as a librarian, both teaching Zotero basics to faculty and researchers, but also helping graduate students onboard to Zotero for some of their thesis and project work. My role here today is to provide my expertise and walk you through the basic functionalities of Zotero as you consider it a tool for your workflow. In this video, you're going to learn 4 basics of Zotero. The first is how to organize your library by creating collections and enabling syncing. Second, we will look at collecting scholarly sources as you browse directly in databases, websites, and other search platforms. Third, we'll take a look at generating our in-text citations and reference lists in a Word document. And then finally, we'll take a look at opportunities to collaborate with others by creating and using Zotero groups, which is a really great option to share your libraries and research resources. Let's begin first by talking about what Zotero is. Zotero is a stable, free, and open source citation management tool. Let's break this down. When we say stable, what I mean is the version of the software that we will be using has been thoroughly tested. It's reliable for public use. Zotero has been around since 2009, and it's been widely used and adopted around the world by many academic and research institutions. Now, when we say free, Zotero offers both free and paid options for accounts. Our free account that we're going to sign up for today includes 300 megabytes of cloud storage for syncing your library. And in my experience, this amount of storage is typically sufficient for the length of a student's program, though it's ultimately going to depend on how many PDFs and web snapshots and attachments are stored within your Zotero library. Now, paid plans do provide additional storage, but at the University of Niagara Falls, we focus on tools that are freely accessible and support learning without added costs. So Zotero aligns perfectly with that philosophy. It's powerful, reliable, and the free version provides a full and robust core functionality needed for your academic work. Now, this last part of being open source really means that the code is publicly available and accessible. And this allows the tool to benefit from a very active community of not only users, but also developers who enhance and maintain it. The Zotero tool allows you to do a lot of different things, everything from collecting sources from a wide range of platforms, organizing, so that ability to really thoroughly organize your library through collections and notes and tags. You can work with sources and annotate them, so things like highlighting and commenting on PDFs. You can cite very seamlessly as you write, so inserting those in-text citations and generating a full formatted reference list. And of course, we can use Zotero groups to share our libraries and collaborate at really any stage of your research. And this allows everything to be synced and kept up to date across devices as well as across groups. Now, even though Zotero offers a lot of functionality, we really are going to be taking a look at kind of the core features of how to use Zotero. And so that's going to be around organizing your library, collecting sources, creating those citations, and that opportunity to share and collaborate with others. So whether you are an instructor, a researcher, or a student, Zotero can add value to your research workflow. Why? Because it can help you stay organized by keeping all of your source citations, PDFs, attachments, and notes together all in one place. You can cite with ease, so automatically inserting those citations and generating bibliographies as you write. It also supports seamless collaboration, so allowing you to share libraries and resources with your research groups and stay perfectly in sync. And because Zotero works both offline and online, you can access your library anywhere across multiple devices. And this is really ideal, especially if you're doing field research or traveling. Now that we know a bit more about Zotero, let's talk about how this workshop video is structured, beginning with our technology setup. This video is meant to be instructional, so you can follow along and come back to for reference at any time, or you can skip ahead to sections that you want to dive into more. The technology that we're going to use in this video includes Zotero 7.0, which is the latest version, and we will walk through the installation process together. I'll be using a Windows laptop, a Google Chrome browser, and Microsoft Word document through the desktop app. Now, some additional supporting resources that you'll have access to includes the UNF Library Zotero Research Guide, a workshop worksheet, which lists all of the activities that we're going to be going through. And of course, you will also have access to the official Zotero support documentation, which is located right on the Zotero website. So let's take a look at what we will be covering in this video. Our agenda includes installing Zotero, setting up your library, collecting some research sources, writing and citing, and then taking a look at how we can collaborate with Zotero groups. Some just very quick reminders here. Zotero is only a tool, and so you do need to assess whether it fits your workflow. It is versatile across devices and browsers, but I do recommend sticking with either a Windows or a Mac laptop and using one of the recommended browsers, which is Google Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. And Zotero's still going to need your judgment. So we're always going to review and verify the things that we bring in and how they look on our reference list. And so you're going to see this in action as we begin to collect and then when we go to cite. Now, in terms of a best experience, it is recommended that we use Zotero using the desktop app and the browser connector, both of which we're going to install. You can absolutely log into your Zotero account online, but the online and desktop versions of Zotero do differ slightly, and the desktop app is really where you're going to get all of the functionality that you require not only for this video tutorial, but also in general. All right, so we are now ready to go with Zotero. We are going to start with the installation process. And there's 4 components to make Zotero work. The first is we need our Zotero account. And this is because it's going to allow you to sync your library across multiple devices and collaborate with others. The second piece is the Zotero desktop app. And this is going to be your main space for saving, organizing, and managing sources. The third piece is our Zotero browser connector. And so this allows you to capture references or citations directly from the web as you're searching for information. Now, the fourth component should already be installed for you, and that's going to be the plugin for either Word document or a Google Doc. And so in most cases, this will be installed. There's nothing that you really need to do. Just be aware that if you are using Zotero for the first time in Google Docs, you are going to be prompted to authenticate. And if we run into any issues with Word, we're not seeing kind of Zotero in our Word document, we can do some troubleshooting for that as well. So the first step that we're going to walk through is registering for a Zotero account. You're going to need this account to access your library from any other computer or device, to sync your references across those devices, and to join groups and collaborate with others. If you already have an account, you can move to our step 2, which is installing the Zotero desktop application. I'm going to start by going to zotero.org, and in the top right, I'm going to click on the login button. On this next page, we are going to click on Register for a free account. And on this registration page, there's going to be 3 pieces of information that are required. The first is a username, the second is an email, and then third is a password. When we're doing our username, if you choose a name that has already been used by another Zotero user, you're going to see this message that says username is not available. And so in this case, I would suggest adding some numbers to make it unique. And so here I can now see that username is in green, and so I'm okay with this username now. For your email address, completely up to you. You can use your UNF email address or you can use your personal. What I would recommend is that if you're going to be using Zotero well beyond your time at the university, I would recommend using your personal. And then, of course, choose a password. And please remember your username and password for our next steps. Once you've entered that information, you're going to click on the register button. And from here, you will open up the email that you registered at, and you're going to have a verification email from Zotero. And so from this email, it will say, "Welcome to Zotero," and there will be a URL there for you to either click or you can paste it into your browser. And this is basically just going to verify that the email you signed up with is from you. So just that final step to verify that we have created a Zotero account. Congratulations, you now have a Zotero account and you are ready for the next step. Our second step is going to be to download and install the Zotero desktop application. Again, this is going to be your main workspace where you're going to save, organize, and manage your sources. So to install the desktop application, we're going to start at zotero.org. We're going to scroll down to the middle of the page where we see this download button. On this next page, it's going to show you those other 2 components that we need to make Zotero work. On the left-hand side of the screen is going to be the download for the desktop app, and on the right-hand side is going to be the connector. So we're going to start off by sticking with the left-hand side, and Zotero is great because it actually identifies what I'm working with. So it's saying here for me that Zotero 7 for Windows, so I'm going to download the desktop app for my Windows laptop. I'm going to click on the download button, and I am going to save it to my downloads folder. That's usually the automatic place it goes. I can see it's working up here. The download is in progress. And when it's ready, I can either double click it here from that kind of space in the top of so I can either double click my file here, or if you prefer, you can open up your downloads folder and click from there. And so what we're doing by double clicking is we're opening up that setup file. Now Zotero isn't a very large application, so it's not going to take up a huge amount of space on your desktop or on your laptop, but it will just take a couple of seconds here to extract that file, and then it'll be ready to go. And so the Zotero Setup Wizard is going to pop up, and from here there really isn't anything that we need to change. So we're going to click through the installation process. I'm going to start by clicking on Next. This page just identifies the setup type, so we do want to keep the Zotero setup standard. We don't need anything custom, so we don't need to change anything here. So click Next. This next screen just tells us where Zotero is going to be installed, and for most laptops, it's automatically going to install it in some sort of application folder. So again, no changes need to be made, and we are going to click on Install. Now, I like to make sure that my application's open after I've completed the setup process. So I am going to keep this little box checked, which is going to launch Zotero immediately after I close this window. So I'm going to go ahead and click on Finish. And we can see here now that Zotero has opened, it's ready to go. So you have your account, you have this desktop app, which is fantastic. The last thing that we need to do is set up our syncing. And this is so that if you go to install Zotero on any other device, you can continue to use that Zotero library, but it will be linked into your account, which means that any sources that you collect, say, for example, on your laptop, are also going to appear on, say, your phone or perhaps another computer that you have at home. So to finish up with our install process, we are going to click on the Setup Syncing text here. That's a hyperlink. We can get to the same place by going to the Edit menu and Settings. But for right now, I'm just going to click on that text. So Setup Syncing. This is going to automatically open me to the space where I'm going to input my username and password that I created with my account. And then click up Setup Syncing. Now I'll know this will be a success because I'll see my username here. I don't need to change any of the defaults that are automatically applied here. So things like syncing, it just basically means that the sources that you have in your library, that you collect to your library on one device, will also be available on other devices that you download the Zotero application to. So we can close out of here, and you are now ready with your Zotero library. Let's move on to the last step, which is installing the Zotero connector plugin for our web browser. Our third and final step for getting Zotero up and running is installing the browser connector. Now the connector is an extension we will be adding to our internet browser, and it lets you save sources from the web directly into your Zotero library in just one click. As a reminder, Zotero works best with either Chrome, Firefox, or Edge. And today I'm going to be using my Google Chrome browser. So to install the connector, we can come back to the homepage of Zotero, zotero.org. We're going to scroll down and click on the download button. And on the next page, we are going to be focused on the right-hand side. So I'm going to see this box that says Install Chrome Connector. I will click on it. And it's going to bring me to my extensions page. And so from here in the top right, I'm going to click Add to Chrome. On the message that pops up, I am going to select Add Extension. And I'll just give it a moment here to install that extension to Google Chrome. I'll know that the extension has been installed because my message will now read Remove from Chrome. And so the final step to making sure that we can use that connector at any point in our browsing is to come up to what's going to look like a little puzzle piece icon. When you hover over it, it does say extensions. And so from here, I need to make that extension visible. So at the bottom, beside Zotero Connector, I'm going to click on the little pin icon. And so now I can see up in my browser bar that there's this new icon. When I hover over it, it's going to say Save to Zotero. So I now know that that extension, the Zotero connector, is now visible, and I'm ready to start collecting. Congratulations, you now have a Zotero library that's ready to use. So far, we have created a Zotero account, downloaded the Zotero desktop app, and installed the Zotero connector web extension. Let's first start with a quick tour of Zotero. There are three main sections in the application. On the left-hand side, we have this column that's dedicated to library and collections. So think of this as your research filing cabinet. We can use it to organize sources into different collections and sub-collections, whether it's by topic, by project, or course. And so this structure really helps you keep track of materials for multiple research projects all at once without mixing them together. It's also where we can access any shared group libraries for collaborative work. In the middle column of Zotero, that's where our collection content is going to be. So think of this as a working list of references for the collection that you've selected. And this is where we can do things like scan, sort, and quickly locate specific sources. You might use it to check which articles you've already added. You can also use it to filter results to focus on a particular author, date, or keyword. Now, we're not going to focus today on how we use things like search within Zotero. However, just know that this column is going to give you a really good overview of the sources that you've collected into Zotero for any particular collection. The last section in Zotero is our right-hand column, and this is where our item metadata and details exist. So this is where our sources are going to be citation ready, and we can use it to review and edit bibliographic or citation details. You can also use it to read or add abstracts, attach PDFs, and include your own notes or tags. It is important to keep this information accurate and complete so that when we go to generate our references and our citations, it's also correct. And we are going to take a look at how when we collect sources into Zotero, we can use it as a gauge for the information that's been brought in. And all of this is going to make sense once we start that collection process. Now, I did talk about creating some sort of organization within our Zotero library. When we talk about kind of folders and subfolders, so thinking again back to how we organize our information on our laptops, our main folders in Zotero are called collections, and our subfolders are called subcollections. There are lots of different ways to organize your Zotero library. It's just really going to depend on what you're working on. So as a student, for example, you might create a collection based on the courses that you're taking, and then add subfolders for specific assignments or topics. So it is important to think as you start what makes the most sense for how you'd like to organize your information. And once you have that in mind, you can create file structures at any point. So let's take a look at creating our first collection. In the top left-hand corner, there's going to be a little file folder icon. And when I click on it, I can now create that new collection. So I'm going to do mine based on courses. So I'm going to put Management 620. And it is being created in my Zotero library. So I'm going to click on Create Collection. I now have that main folder. But we know that in our courses, we have multiple assignments. So I'm going to create a sub-collection within Management 620 that is going to allow me to organize my information based on different projects and assignments. So I've highlighted here the Management 620 folder I just created, and I'll come back up to the File folder icon and click it again to create a collection within Management 620. And here I'm creating a collection called Assignment 1. And it's indicating to me that I'm creating it within the Management 620 folder. If, for example, I did that and I created a folder in the wrong place. So let's say, for instance, I had another course, Management 610. But oh no, I have created that within Management 620, which wasn't what I intended to do, I can move these folders at any time. So I'm going to click on Management 610 and I can drag it around to just be in my library. And so now Management 610 and Management 620 folders are those high-level folders that I can create additional subfolders or subcollections in at any time. You can keep adding in these sub-collections as needed to create a structure that's going to work best for your work, your research, your projects. I will ask for the purpose of this workshop that we create at least one collection so that we can start to search and bring in sources into that Zotero library collection. Now that you've got your structure set up a little bit, you are ready to move on to collecting sources. We're now ready to begin searching and collecting our resources into Zotero. So for our first search scenario, I'm going to be looking at the library catalog, and I'm going to be using a research database to find information on my topic. Why do we use research databases? Well, at academic institutions and based on the assignments that we do, we know that we have to bring in scholarly types of information. So this is going to be things like our articles, our ebooks. It can even be things like reports and conference proceedings, news pieces even. So there's a whole host of information that we can use for our assignments. And so when we use our research databases through the library, we know that we'll have access to the full text of those sources rather than encountering paywalls like we might if we were doing searches in Google Scholar. So nothing wrong with searching multiple platforms. We just need to understand some of the limitations that we will encounter depending on where we're searching for information. So I'm going to begin by searching from the library's homepage, library.unfc.ca. And in this search box that's presented on the front page, I'm going to be searching across the library collections and databases. So we can do a pretty broad search this way. To get into my advanced search, I'm going to click on the search button. And on this next screen, before we start searching, I would recommend up in this top box where it says Welcome Guest, sign into your institution, I am going to click on that and make sure that essentially the library database knows who I am so that I can indeed access the resources that I select. So once you've logged in, you will no longer see that gray bar up at the top. So let's do a really simple search. I'm going to do digital marketing, and I'm going to do something on health and search. And so this is a really basic search. To go more in depth on how to effectively search for materials, I would recommend reaching out to RIS or Research and Instruction Services. There are a number of different resources that you can use to learn about how we can develop an effective search, as well as developing our research topics. But for the purpose of this video today, what we're going to do is I want to show you how we can collect single and multiple sources at one time into our Zotero library. So from this results page, what I'm going to do is first show us how to select and collect one source at a time. So let's say this first result, the Unleashing Big Data Analytics, is an article that is going to be relevant and of use for my research paper, perhaps. I'm going to click on its title, and this is going to bring me into what we call the record view. So all of the information on this page is going to be directly about this particular article. I can see right at the top, it's identifying for me what kind of information it is. It is a peer-reviewed academic journal article, and it gives me all the information that I'll need for my citation information. We also have up at the top here this place to access the full text of that article, and we can click on that for an access point. To demonstrate how we are going to collect this resource into Zotero, I'm going to come up to my Zotero connector up at the top. It may or may not look like a Z. It could also look like a little paper icon. Either way, we are going to click on it. And the first time that you do it, after you've installed the extension, we're going to get this message. And it's basically just telling me that it's making the connection between the connector and my Zotero desktop app, which is why I have to always have Zotero running in the background when I'm doing collection from the web. So I'll just press got it on this message. And now I can go back and click on that icon. Right now it's looking like a little page because Zotero is automatically um, essentially identifying what kind of source it is. So I'll click on it to collect it into my library. And so the message we see here up at the top, a couple of things. It's telling me what folder the source is being collected into, and in this case it's Management 610. I always have the opportunity to select a different folder if I've highlighted one that it shouldn't be going into. So I can click on this little arrow, bring down the drop-down menu, and say, for instance, this article needs to be in Management 620. I can change it here. The other part of the message is just telling me the title of the source that it is capturing. And in this instance, there's a big red X that says full text PDF. So it's not bringing in the actual article itself into Zotero. But let's take a look at what this looks like in our Zotero app. So here's the item that I just collected. As I mentioned, the middle column is going to list all of the things that we're collecting and adding to Zotero. And then along the right-hand side, this is going to be where all that good metadata for our citations and any attachments is going to be listed. I do find as a best practice, it is good to review this information as you're collecting, because sometimes Zotero isn't correct. And this is just because of the metadata that it can take a look at. So an example would be sometimes I will collect a source that's an ebook, and sometimes Zotero identifies it as an ebook, which is great, but sometimes it'll try and say it's actually a website. And so when I look at the information, I know that it's not a website. It actually is an ebook with chapters and different content. And so in that case, we can, within our Zotero metadata fields, we can actually change by clicking on any of the fields to change that information. So if this particular item I just brought in was something other than a journal article, I could select it and then of course change the information to reflect that type of source. But in this case, in reviewing this item, which was a journal article, it looks like all of the information is correct, and it's also brought in an abstract for you. All right, let's do that process once again. So coming back to the results page in our library database search, let's say, for instance, this second item is of interest and is useful for my research. I can collect it again. So that same process, I click in on the title to come into the record view, and I'm going to click on the Zotero connector icon. And again, we'll see that message, where it's saving it to, what the title of the item is, and whether or not a full text PDF has been brought in with that information. And once again, I'm now starting to see the building of a library for Management 620. So coming back to this results page, we can absolutely select one item at a time, but we can also select multiple items at a time. So on this results page, if I look up to my Zotero connector, I see that the icon has changed. And instead of showing a little page, it's now looking like this yellow folder. And the reason for that, once I click on it, you'll see, is that Zotero is recognizing that on this particular page, our results page, there are multiple items. And so by clicking on the icon on this page, we can now identify the items that I want to add into my library. So this is really good if you know that there are a number of different results that are going to be useful for your topic, you're going to read, you're going to use in your research. It just means that you don't have to go into every single item and add it one at a time. So from this list, I'm going to select ones that I want to bring into my library. And once you're done, we're going to select OK. And so the more that you select, it might take just a little bit longer to bring in. What we're seeing with this message is slightly different than our message with our single item ad. And that's because in some instances, you are seeing a full text PDF being brought in with the metadata or that bibliographic information into Zotero. So I'll just give it one more second here as I kind of wait for this final one, the determining the criteria of digital medical something or other. Wait to see whether that PDF comes in with us. When I go into my Zotero application, look at this. We now have a well-developed or in progress developing list of resources around my topic of digital marketing and health. In some instances, I do have attachments, and these attachments are going to be PDFs, the full article, or sorry, the full text of the article. But in some instances, there aren't. And so there is a way to request Zotero to go out and search and try and retrieve that PDF or the full text of that particular source. So let's take a look at how we can do that here. I can either select all of them or select specific ones. So to do this, I am clicking on the title and I'm holding down the shift button so that I can select all of them. If I just want specific items, I can hold down the control the control button. So I'm going to select all the ones that don't have an attachment. Once I've selected those, or they are now in blue, I'm going to right click, and from this menu, I'm going to click on Find Full Text. And so Zotero is going to do its best to go out into the web and see whether there is an open version of that PDF. There are going to be instances where Zotero cannot retrieve the full text PDF, and that might just be based on your access level. So this happens specifically with our Google Scholar. Not everything in Google Scholar we are going to have access to because you are going to find some things that are against paywalls. But in other instances, and so we know that all of these items are coming from our library database, and you as students or faculty or researchers here at the university should have access to all of the things you see in our catalog or our database. And so in that instance, we can do a different step to attaching the PDF. And so it might not have come in those cases. So I'm seeing two here, for instance, perhaps because there's just that extra layer of accessing the PDF that Zotero can't go through. But you absolutely have the ability to add an attachment. So as an example, this item determining the criteria of digital medical marketing, I want to come back to the library database or catalog, and I'm going to find that record because I want to access it. So this is the item number 4. I'm going to click on the item to access the information. Okay, it brought in all that information for me. But now I'm going to click on that access point, View Record in DOAJ. And DOAJ is a platform. And so right on this first page, it's only giving me the abstract, but I still have the option to read it online. And so it's just that extra step of accessing the full information of that article. And here we're seeing that it's opening up the PDF of that particular article. So from here, I have the option to, because I can access this information and it's coming from my library, so I know that I have the right to read and use this information for my research. I can download the file, and in most cases, it will download it to your downloads folder, so just keep in mind. And then opening up both my Zotero application again, and also opening up my downloads folder. Here's the article that we just downloaded. I can drag and drop it over top of the Zotero item. And when I drop it over top, it now is going to attach that PDF. So that's kind of the second way that we can bring in the particular items or documents into Zotero, is first asking Zotero to try and go retrieve the full text. And in instances where that doesn't work and we are able to access those items, we can download a copy of the PDF and then bring it over into Zotero to attach it. Let's come back to our search. So we did single items and multiple items through our library database. But let's take a look at an example of doing just a regular Google search. I can copy and paste my exact search string into Google, because we know that some of the information that we use for our assignments isn't always just going to be found in our research databases. Sometimes it's going to be important to use things like industry reports or blog posts created by organizations and companies that we're exploring. And a whole host of other types of information. We know that we can find that through a Google search. And in some cases, it will be important to bring those examples and case studies. And for instance, here I have what looks like article from Forbes. So let's click on that. Now, I know that Forbes is a very well-established and well-known and credible um, place for industry-based information. Um, and in this case, it's not an academic article, but it is a blog post that's written by an industry expert. And so again, if we're taking a look at how we evaluate information, knowing whether it's appropriate to bring into the assignment, evaluating it for credibility and authenticity and authority, I would recommend looking at the resources provided by RIS, or Research Instruction Services, because there is a lot of information around how we evaluate information. And you can also connect with a librarian as well. In this case, we're still focused in on collecting that information. So we're going to do that same process that we saw with our other items. We're going to come up to the Zotero connector, and we're going to save it to Zotero. Now we're going to see that same message, right? It's showing us where this information or this source is being saved to. It gives me a portion of the title of the source, but this time it's a little bit different. It's demonstrating that it's capturing a snapshot, not a PDF. And so when I come into Zotero, I'm going to see that How Digital Marketing Can Be a Game Changer blog post it is being brought in and there is still an attachment. It looks a little different. And this is because it's the information format was not in a PDF. It's not a journal article. And so it's considered a web snapshot, meaning that it's not just a screenshot. It's not just a um, single view of that item. When I double click on it, it's going to open this up within Zotero, and it's now going to show you the full text of that blog post. So it's a snapshot of that website or that web page, a single moment in time. You may find that there are still live links on here, but this particular item is not live. It's not the live web. It is simply a single snapshot of that full source. And so when we look at our attachments in Zotero and work with them in Zotero, we can use them very similar to how we might read any type of PDF using things like Adobe or any other PDF reader. I've just opened here one of the journal articles that I brought in. And so you have the opportunity to engage with this by highlighting. You can also create notes and underline and do many of the other features that you can with PDFs and other readers. The benefit of using these things within Zotero is that you can now keep all of your research, your notes, things like highlights, etc. You can keep it all in one place, all within Zotero. And this is really helpful, especially if you're traveling, because you can keep this library synced with your account. And that means that anytime you open this library, on your phone, on your laptop, on your desktop, you're going to come back to the same place that you left it. So if you're reading an article and you still need to finish up on the highlights, you can do that. And once you're connected back to a Wi-Fi connection, it will automatically sync back to your account. There are a lot of different features when it comes to creating notes and working with PDFs. We're not going to go too into depth with that, but I did want to show you both how you ask for the retrieval of a full text PDF, how we can add attachments manually by dragging and dropping, and also how we open those research objects or PDFs or attachments, and how we can start to use them within Zotero for our research workflow. The last thing that I'll mention, because I know that we tend to use Google Scholar as well, as it can be a great starting place. I can take the searches that I've done in my library database, research databases in Google, and I can literally copy and paste that same search and go within Google. And so the functionality of collecting sources into Zotero is going to be very much the same. In this case, because Google Scholar provides us with a results list, this is the place where we're going to be doing a multi-add. So as an example, I did my digital marketing and health search. I'm going to save it to Zotero. I click on the little file folder, and it's going to ask me which items I want to bring into my library. As a reminder, when we're in Zotero, we do need to do a kind of a double check of our sources as we collect. That's one of my best practices. So when I come into the app and I go back to that previous item we brought in, which was kind of that blog post, how digital marketing can be a game changer, I want to do that double check on the right-hand side of my screen to see whether Zotero has identified it correctly. And in this case, it was close, but we can get a little bit more exact. So it's identified it as a web page, but we know that that particular information isn't really just a web page. It's a little bit more specific. I would say that it is closer to a blog post. And so I can change my blog post item. by selecting. And of course, we do need to double check what information is required for citing when I do a blog post citation. I am going to leave this here just for now because I want to demonstrate to you some things that can happen when we are doing our write and cite portion, and how when we update information within Zotero, we can then update it within our writing. For now, you have the ability to explore how to collect different sources from your web browser, whether they are web pages, whether they are within a research database that is from the library's homepage, whether it's other kinds of material that you want to bring in, again, searching through the web. And so I'll invite you to kind of explore different information that you would like to try and add into Zotero before we move on to our next and final stage, which is our writing and citing portion. We've now made it to our final step. And so we're going to talk about how we write our assignments and use Zotero to insert our citations. Now, Zotero makes academic writing a bit faster and easier through its Cite While You Write integration with both Microsoft Word and Google Docs. This feature is meant to allow for the insertion of in-text citations and help you to automatically build your reference list while you write. So this keeps everything properly formatted and consistent with your chosen citation style. Before we start, we do need to make sure that, again, that Zotero desktop app is running in the background. So we don't have to keep it kind of open. We can certainly minimize it. But if we do not have it running, it won't make the connection into Word. We're also going to do a quick test. Once I've opened my Word document, I'm going to check up at the top that I do have a Zotero menu button. So here I am seeing it, and this is going to allow me to access all of the features for my in-text citations and building my bibliography. If for whatever reason you don't see this tab up here in your Word document, we can do a quick troubleshooting fix. Most of the time, it is going to require a reinstallation of the Zotero plugin for Word. So to do this, we can come back into the app. We're going to go to the Edit menu and select our settings. Along the left-hand side, click Cite. And then we're going to scroll down to a place where word processors, there's different buttons here. And so for Microsoft Word, it will be important for you to click the Reinstall Microsoft Word add-in. From there, you are going to close your Word application and reopen it. And I will say that in most cases, this takes care of not being able to see that Zotero tab in Word. If we're beyond that, we may need to look at other troubleshooting options. So when writing an academic paper, you are going to have kind of two parts of referencing. You are going to have your in-text citations, which are going to appear right in the body of your paper to show where your sources are supporting the ideas that you're mentioning. And then you're going to have your reference list, which appears right at the very end of your paper, and this provides those full details for each source. So think of it like within your paper, you're providing this roadmap for your reader so that they can say, okay, this idea is coming from Smith 2023. When I go to that reference list as your reader, I can now take a look at what the article name is and how I can access it, because I'm probably interested in reading a little bit more about that particular source or this topic. So they work together to essentially help your reader, but in terms of citing, it's an important practice in academic work. Why? Because it's shown that we've done the research. It's providing evidence to support our statements and our positions on a topic. And of course, it's giving credit back to the original author of that idea. So in my Word document here, I'm doing an example where, I've written my paper, and so now I need to start to insert those citations for where ideas are not my own. So let's say, for example, this second paragraph here is where I need to add in my first citation. I'm going to place the cursor where I need that citation to be inserted. I'm going to come up to this first button, which is Add Edit Citation. And when we click on it, the first time that we insert a citation, Zotero is going to ask us what our citation style is. From this default list, APA 7th edition is available. And so we know that at UNF, most of our assignments and most of our courses and instructors do require APA 7th. So I'm just going to make sure that I have this style highlighted in blue, and then I'm going to click OK. And for the remainder of the time that I'm in this text document, everything is going to be formatted in APA. Now we need to insert that citation. I personally don't find this search box overly helpful because I don't remember every single source that I've brought in for every single assignment and collection that I have in Zotero. So to make your life a little bit easier, you might want to click on this little tiny arrow beside the Z, and that's going to give you an option to look at the classic view. When I open this, I'm now going to see essentially a little mini window of my Zotero library. I now have the visual and I can remember, hey, that information that I'm talking about right now in my paper is coming from this first article, Application and Trend Analysis. So to insert my text in text citation, I'm going to highlight the title of that particular source, and then I'm going to click OK. And so now what we're seeing is a fully and correct formatted APA version of an in-text citation for that article. And again, wherever my cursor is placed, that is where my citation is going to be inserted. So let's do another example. I'm going to come down to this statement and I'm going to add another citation. Again, I'm going to go to my classic view. And now let's say this third article is where that idea is coming from. I'll again select it and then click OK. And once again, we are seeing a correctly formatted APA version of an in-text citation for that article. Let's say, for instance, that we have multiple authors. So this is usually used when we have ideas or a theory, for instance, that is talked about and mentioned and researched by a number of different authors in various papers. So let's take a look at how we add an in-text citation for multiple sources that are talking about the same idea. I will add edit citation, come down to the classic view, and this time we are going to click on the multiple sources button before we start to add. So let's say this second article is what I need to cite. I'm going to select it and then use the arrow that points to the right. And I'm going to do that for a few. Okay. And let's do one more. And once you have all the sources that you need for that in-text citation, we're going to click on OK. And I now have 4 sources here in my in-text. I'm going to just continue to add in some additional sources so that we can have a robust reference list. Okay, now let's say that we are now at the end of our assignment. We've done all our writing. That final step for your assignment is going to be to list all of your references. And so we know APA tells us that our references are going to be on a completely new page, that I'm going to have references bolded and as a title in the center. I'm going to go to the next line, and again, my cursor is where that citation information is going to go. This time, because I'm at the end and I've done all my in-text, I'm going to click on the second button up at the top, which is Add Edit Bibliography. And sorry, I am going to zoom out just a little bit so you can see how this is automatically done through Zotero. So my cursor is still here where my references need to go, and Add Edit Bibliography. Okay, so we now have our full reference list of all of that great citation information that we captured through Zotero. And one thing that I need to stress here is we as researchers, and you are a researcher as a student, we need to, or we have the responsibility to still ensure that these citations make sense. And so I would encourage you to go through this reference list and essentially do a spot check. So right now I can see a few things that are popping out to me that don't necessarily make sense or look slightly different than what I would expect. An example here, I'm just going to zoom in. So right here we have some boxes, some essentially characters that didn't necessarily translate well over into Zotero. I also, if I scroll down, I'm noticing that I have something that looks like no date. And so what I need to do is I need to go back into Zotero and I need to check out why this information might have come over into the reference list the way that it did. So let's take this first example, determining the criteria of medical marketing. I'm going to come back into Zotero. Let's take a look at this article. So in the metadata itself, yeah, it's definitely a journal article. But when I come down and I take a look at the publication, I'm seeing something that perhaps isn't translating well over into my reference list. And that's because we're not using an alphanumeric base. This could be symbols that Zotero just can't quite interpret. And so what I can do is, because I have my attachment, I am going to open it in Zotero. And I'm just going to verify from this information that's already listed on the article, is there a place that I can pull over the publication title? And in this case, I can. Right up at the top, I'm seeing that this article is from Journal of Hospital. So I'm going to copy that information and I'm going to change it in my publication field to now be Journal of Hospital. So that record has now been updated in Zotero. Before we go back to our Word document, I do want to take a look at that second item, which looked a little strange to me, and that was kind of coming back to our snapshot. So remember how I said sometimes Zotero may not correctly identify the item type? This is an instance of that. So that Forbes article, if I open it, I can see that this is actually a blog post. It is created by an author. It's for Forbes. So this really isn't a web page or a website. This is more closely aligned with a blog post. So I can change that information. I can change the item type by pulling down the menu item, or the menu list, and I'm going to select blog post. Now, some of that information has stayed, but I also know that I was missing the date. And so we absolutely can have sources that either a date isn't present or it's just not showing us one. And it is okay when we have missing information to indicate that. But if I come back to this source and I take a look at the information presented here, I know that there is a publication date that's present. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy and paste over that information again, because we have the ability to change and update and edit any of the fields listed here on the right. So I now have kind of a few changes going on here. In that first article, we updated the publication title because the symbols weren't translating in our reference list. I've also changed the item type for this particular source to reflect that it is more of a blog post, and I've added a date. So the records in our Zotero library, they are up to date and correct. When I come back into my Word document, it's still showing these symbols. And so what I need to do is I need to do a refresh. So I'm going to come up here to the top and I'm going to click on refresh. And because Zotero and Word are connected and work together, once I press that refresh button, I can now see my information has changed to reflect what we did as updates in Zotero, right? So I now have a publication date. I also am now identifying the kind of organization that this blog post belongs to, Forbes, as well as an author. I'm not seeing that retrieved from because I don't require that for a blog post. So still some kind of manual checks that we need to do, and that is just part of the research process. Zotero is simply a tool, and it's going to provide us correctly formatted information, but it's still our job to double check that information. And so I know that there's going to be one more citation, say for instance, that I'm adding right at the end that perhaps isn't reflected in my reference list yet, because it's one that I wasn't writing about before. What I want to do is once I'm completely done writing, and again, if we are adding references or in-text citations after I've created my reference list, not a problem. We are going to hit our refresh button. So that I now have captured all of the citations in my writing. And so just as a quick note, whatever I am creating as an in-text citation in my writing over here, that is what's going to be listed in my reference list. So let's say, for example, I have created a Zotero library that has 30 different research objects. I have different articles and ebooks and web snapshots, etc. My library might have 30 items listed in it, but within my writing, if I've only cited 20 of those items, that's what's going to be reflected in my reference list. Only 20 items are going to appear rather than the full extent of your library. So just something to keep in mind as you're writing and double checking references. And so now we have a completed assignment. We have inserted our in-text citations. We've created that full reference list that is APA formatted. Of course, we've done those double checks because at this point, and for those that are kind of in further terms in their study, we should be able to pick up on patterns of referencing. And so I do have questions as a librarian. Sam, why didn't you show me this tool earlier? And the reason for it is mostly aligned with my teaching philosophy. And it is that when we are starting off in our studies, whether you're an undergraduate, a graduate, a PhD level, we want to be able to learn the skills before we learn the tools. And so in this instance, I like to teach Zotero as a tool a little bit later on because we need to learn the skills of how to craft APA citations. We need to know what information is required for particular items, particular sources, so that when we use tools like this, I can do a spot check in my reference list and I can identify where there might have been some errors. So again, Zotero is simply a tool, and we need to kind of insert that human element and always work with the tool and not just rely completely on its output. Congratulations! You've made it through the Zotero Basics workshop. Before we wrap up, let's just take a quick look at what you can now confidently do with Zotero. You have created your Zotero account and you've installed the desktop app, synced your library, and added the browser connector. So this is going to give you essentially a complete workspace for saving and managing sources as you research. Your library is now organized with collections, and you can start to collect sources from the library catalog, research databases, Google Scholar, or really anywhere on the web. You've also learned how to edit items and the importance of verifying sources as we collect. Zotero is only a tool after all, and we have the flexibility to make any corrections or add in additional information to the metadata fields in our Zotero library. You can also now create in-text citations and generate a reference list in a Word document. We've also touched on how we refresh our document as we have to make any of those minor changes to our Zotero library. And finally, we've explored Zotero groups, which will allow you to collaborate and keep shared sources synced across team members. You're now well on your way to making Zotero a smooth, efficient part of your research workflow. If you need help as you continue to explore, please do check out the UNF's Zotero Research Guide or visit the official Zotero support site for more tips and troubleshooting.